So John is trying to blackmail me.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what we're going to talk about for the episode. First, we're going to cover some comments from last week.
Yes. Good comments. Yeah. Because that's what we're going to start doing. I mean, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, we basically decided that right at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I was going to say the episode went out like 56 minutes ago. I mean, 56 minutes ago as of we're recording this. So when they hear this, it would have been last week, honestly. But yeah, so
but we are going to start replying to comments at the beginning of each episode. So if you do leave a comment, we will most likely have our own thoughts and opinions and reply in this podcast. Because
caveat, not every comment.
No, not every comment. No, not every comment. But if we have something to say, that just can't go in a comment, because honestly, after spending nearly 2 hours replying to someone in a comment on Facebook, I'd rather just talk.
Yes. So we're going to go through some comments. Then we're going to go through a couple of Morgan things that I want to bring up. And then I may go through the question that you keep asking me about with the editing.
No, not may. You will.
May. If we remember, because we may forget, you see.
Yeah, you will. I won't.
So I'll be like, and that's the end. And then you're like, no.
Yeah, pretty much.
So do you wanna start off with the comments, or
I can start off with a comment?
I guess just as a bit of clarity, so people understand what we're doing. We've got the comment, obviously, on the back end of YouTube, and we keep the comment up. So we're not hiding it away, i.e. reacting to it or replying to it. So it's still shown to us. And then we're bringing the points into Obsidian, shared Obsidian, for us to then use and reflect upon, because I don't want to have to read through all of these comments every single time to see which comments I want to reply to. So that's what we're doing. And we're both using the same page. So I'm looking at the Obsidian page right now with the comments that I got from Colin's comment and Dovos's comment. And John's got 3 points on Colin's. I assume Colin only had one comment. Yeah,
it was just so I'm just going back in and also grabbing it out so that I have the context surrounding it. Where is reading books? There we go.
Yeah, that's one of the positives of the thumbnail, is you can literally see. But this is the comments like, no, that's last week. That's this week. There's the reading books. Cool.
Yeah, it's lovely. Cool. So I mean, I can start with Colin, and perhaps we'll start there, and then you can talk about the other ones, and I'll probably have thoughts on the other ones too. Just Colin's was the one that jumped out to me and it made me giggle. Do I read the actual comment? Because wow, that's a long comment. Maybe not.
I was going to say I wouldn't read the whole comment. Maybe either read the bit that needs context or just speak about your thoughts, because I would imagine some people obviously haven't seen the comment either. So read the part of the comment that makes sense, not the whole thing. It's like,
I mean, the whole thing kind of is the whole context, but yeah. So it was a great comment. It made me giggle. We are incredibly entertaining, thought-provoking, and stimulating, and occasionally downright shout at the screen inducing. Thank you. I actually take great compliment for that one. That made me smile. Yes, thank you. And mentioned how we contradict each other and ourselves mostly all of the time, and I'm like, yeah. My pretty much reaction to that was yeah. And I think one of the points I had was one of the episodes we were talking about we were talking about experts. I can't remember the context around it, but it was about the experts being proven wrong, and then they are viewed as losing their expertise. Now, I'm not saying this is what Colin says, but it kind of harked back to that kind of conversation of like, yes, as people with expertise, yes, we contradict ourselves, because for me, it's never as simple of like, it's not as simple as like, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. This is very much, as he goes on to say, a stream of consciousness. And one of the things that I love about these conversations is it allows for me to have a lot of reflection, even as I'm talking. And then, I enjoy them.
Because I brought up Colin's comment as well. I think the word contradicting to me, I was like, hold up, what? I'm not too sure about that. But when reading the rest of the context, it does make sense. It's interesting for me because I don't see it. Maybe this is a term thing, which that actually I might talk about that Twitter interaction in a minute. But using contradicting as the word there, to me, is like, it's not it to me, it doesn't accurately address what's going on, because I don't think we're contradicting ourselves. I think we're debating ourselves.
Yeah, I think I find that.
Which,
I mean, that's what I took from it.
yeah,
I changed the word contradicting to debating, and I think it's like talking down, going further down. He mentioned I particularly love John telling us he's going to write a book soon, one day maybe, at the end of the conversation video, where you both agreed that most people don't and no one needs to read beyond the first chapter. And my response to that is, yeah, but we don't. And we if I remember rightly, we are sharing our own views, and that's
mhm.
literally it. There are many people who still find value from a book, and being able to distill my ideas that develop from this conversation and from my conversations with clients into a distillable format for people to digest a bit easier, because this stuff is pretty heavy, and my audience, for example, are not people who usually consume this, and this is where all the juicy stuff comes out. So it's a matter for me, it's like a matter of audience. In terms of for myself, I don't need to read past the first chapter, because most books are not designed for me to read,
Mm.
and don't give me what I want, which I think is what we were talking about in that episode. Like,
Yeah,
we didn't get what we wanted from the books.
I
And
think.
one thing that I'll be paying attention to is how I write the book,
Mm.
and figuring out. And one of the reasons why I haven't really started is because I'm trying to figure out how, like, what angle to come from.
This is going to come round circle. Yeah, this is like a massive circle here. So I think when it comes to that comment, I mean, the two words that stick out of that entire paragraph comment is gloriously outrageous. Like, yes. Like, being able to get someone to be intrigued enough in the conversation to want them, like, for them to want to share their own opinion
I
means
love it. It's so
it means we're
exciting when I
talking
saw
about
that.
something that's useful, or it triggers thought, which is the whole point. When it comes to the book thing, I think when we're speaking about books, we have like a general, like, a view, like a stereotypical-esque view of what a book is, kind of like Atomic Notes, the 4 Hour Work Week, those styles of books.
Yes,
I
yeah.
And those styles of books are the ones that people can listen on audiobook on a train for 8 hours and then forget what they listened to. They can go through the book and only take one or two real points from it, because it's a lot of storytelling, and that's
Mm,
what those books are. I mean, I don't know how much I can say, so I'm going to remove names for the moment, but I'm working with someone that's writing a book, and they are writing a book with editors, and the editors want it to be more story. They want them to tell more story, and they also want them to tell more science. So it's like, you need to add lots of sciencey jargon words, but tell a really nice, catchy, friendly story. But those don't work together. You can't tell a nice, friendly story and tell science, because the science inherently is going to make it complex. You can't
mm.
not. Like, science is jargon. So they want the science without the jargon, with the story, which inherently means oversimplification.
Yeah.
That's what it leads to. And that's where I think our gripes come, which
Mhm.
means the oversimplification leads to one chapter being able to summarize most of the book, and the rest of the book being them trying to go into some nuance, trying to go into science, but not going too deep so that it confuses people, etc., etc. And I mean, the book that I'm reading, I can show it. Like, it's friggin' massive. It's like 1,000 something pages long. What is it? Yeah, 1,200 pages long. And then the one I have on my Kindle is also like 900 pages. I read 5, maybe 6 pages of that. If you're lucky, I'll read a chapter, which is like 25 page. Well, I say a chapter, a section of a chapter is like 25 pages.
Mm.
But that to me is far denser. It's far more dense than
Yeah, I think
the
that's
books
the
you'd
thing.
get.
Yeah. And
And
and that is the
writing
bit.
a book, that's what we're getting at. I think it's like, I would want to write a 5 page chapter in my book that's extremely dense, that gets people to think, and
Mm.
then drop the book for like 3 months because they're going out doing XYZ, rather than me writing a 150-page book that people can just blitz through.
Yeah, I don't want people to be able to blitz for a book that I write, because it's pointless. It's a really cool experience I had. I think it was late last year, and it was a book club, and we were going through a particular book, one that I had very, very strong beliefs against, but it was part of the thing to interact with the book and the reader of where they are. And it was really interesting because I approached it not from let's read it as fast as possible, because that's normally how it's like, oh, I just want to read the book, get the gist, and then I'll move on with my life. It was like, no, I want to actually get to the nuance of the book and go deeper into the book. And so it took much longer to read, which I think is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a book these days to challenge me, not just to tell me stuff I already know. And unfortunately, most of the stuff that's out there has been like in the kind of public facing eye, in the marketing eye. Every time I see people give their lists of the top 10 books for entrepreneurs, I'm like, yeah, no, 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 because what happens is people lose the nuance on that one. They actually lose that. What?
We are divergent by design, you see.
We are divergent, exactly, and that is true. Yeah, I just love that. That title. I am slightly envious of that title. I'm not gonna lie. But anyway,
I was like, this is just perfect. Just drop that there.
I am a marketer deep down. I'm very good at him. But yeah, and that's the thing, is like, because a lot of books are marketed for the gem pop. It is for the gem pop. For gem pop, it is, and for people who don't know, that's general population.
Look at you using jargon.
I know, right? We were talking about books that are marketed for the general population because that's the books that are promoted on the internet all the time.
Mm.
And then when you look at a book like Extended Mind, which is still a little bit,
I would say it's more popular than sciencey. Like, it's not a textbook, and I don't think it's a book that you would get as a pre-reading for a lecture. But I don't think it's a book that would be in popular media either. It's kind of like, it's sort of like Building a Second Brain. It's that sort of, it's not quite popular, but it's not quite niche either. It's sort of like in the middle. I would call it a science communication book.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And that one takes me a bit longer to get through. And because I'm actually thinking about what's being said, and I was very early in my stage of like extended cognition when I was reading it, and it took me longer and it was slower, and I wanted to just sit with the book. I think I said this last time, like, I want to sit with the book and really just dive into it and like surround myself with the ideas, which is something that I've done with is it Science of Coaching?
Becoming a sports coach.
Becoming a sports coach.
I was about to ask you about the book.
Yeah, and every time I dive in there, I just look at one sentence. I'm like, oh, shit! I need to spend 6 months thinking about that, and then I'll come back to it. And that's what I like, is that emerging ideas. It's those ideas that are kind of coming, and the more I perceive, becoming a perceptual learner, like being able to see things in my environment means I can take them into action. I can really like live them and bring them forward, and it's so much more. It's not subconscious, but it's very much like it's emerging very naturally, versus these gem pop books which are like, just do this, and everything's fine. I'm like, yeah, but
the thing that irritates me about those books, right, is the authors know that it's more complicated. They know it's more nuanced, and they know there is more to the story, but they've had to package the story in a way that the editors, the marketers, the publishers not necessarily like approve of, but like it's got to be consumable to the masses, which I get it, I understand it, but to me it's just a little bit annoying. And this is where it's something I'm like in my head at the moment when it comes to researching some other people, is money over morals. And I think some people take the money too far, like they want too much money and they drop too much of their morals. Where that line is, everyone's going to be different. That obviously changes with context, environment. Like if you've got no money, you need money, then maybe you drop your morals to get some money, that sort of thing. Like I understand life is difficult, but yeah, life is hard. But I think the morals behind a book and the values that you hold in what I call your philosophy of practice, I think those need to be upheld well enough that you don't lose credibility. And this is where behavioral integrity comes in. Like, do you actually enact? Do you actually do the thing you say? This is something that you've recently obviously been going through. And I think this relates as well to a comment I wanted to bring up from Davos. Davos was saying about textbooks and essentially said textbooks won't help because there's an overflow of information. And I think, like, bringing back the context of the comment, I mean, they left quite a few comments. I love the comments. I'm like, yes, I agree with so much. But the context of that comment is around, like, you can't just read a textbook and know it all. Like, it's just not possible. And I think textbooks get a bad rap because of formal education. Like, when you go to formal education, you have like the Psychology 101 book, and it's like 1,000 pages long, and you got to read it for your pre-reading of like every lecture. I think it gives textbooks a bad rap because when you actually look at textbooks face value, what they are is they are a book full of books. Like,
yes,
each chapter is a book on its own. I look at my cognitive psychology textbook and say, okay, I'm going to read the chapter on working memory now. and it will take me like 2 months to get through. I'm going to read the chapter on visual perception now, and it'll take me like 3 months to get through. And then I'll look back at the working memory and go, actually, I want to reread that book chapter again. And that's why I don't have many books. That's why I don't read tons of books, which is where it comes back to the comment on Twitter that I was alluding to. I responded to someone on Twitter, and I disagreed with their post because they were shallow with the words that they used. They essentially missed out a word of the sentence, and it changed the meaning of the sentence. They were saying that you should note down everything. Like, basically, the interpretation that you would get is you should write down everything so you don't forget it. Because of the phrasing of the sentence, you rephrase the sentence, and you should write down most of the things so you don't forget it. And you're like, okay, and there's just such a lack of clarity. And it was just a small change you could have put in the tweet to change things. And the thread ended up with me talking with someone about, is this really a hill I want to die on? Is this really an argument I want to push? And the answer is yes, because like with textbooks, like with academic books, like with people that are in a field of science, they're particular about the words they use because it changes the meaning. And if it changes the meaning, it changes the beliefs and the values and the philosophy of practice that person holds. And if you're pushing a narrative that can be misinterpreted as a different way of acting, i.e. a different behavior, then they're not doing what they said they're doing, which means, one, it shows either they don't understand what they're doing, or they don't have the behavioral integrity to push what it is that they want, or they're a little bit careless. I understand being a little bit careless, especially on social media, but they need to own up to those mistakes. And I do myself. Like, if people call me out on words that I've missed or mistakes I've made, I'm like, yep, I'm gonna own up to that, and this is what I meant, and then I'll explain in more depth. And that's where the books irritate me a bit with the content. And it's like, how do you then write a book that isn't oversimplified? I think you need to write, in my head, you need to write a textbook-esque book where you can go into any part of the book at any time and get something from it, or it challenge your head in some way. Like, it's a rereadable book that challenges the ways that you think.
Yeah, I just found the original tweet.
All right. Which one? I've been going ham on Twitter recently.
I know. It's great. I think it's, and this is something that I experienced as well during the last week when I made a comment on a reply on Facebook, and my language wasn't quite clear, and it was a little bit more binary than actually what my belief was, and I was challenged on it, and I'm like, yeah, good point, because that's something that I often do, especially when it comes to the tech space and the business world, because everyone's just like, do this, do that, do this, do that, and it's like, oh no, don't just do this, do that, like, stop.
So I had this interesting, we're moving away from the comments now, by the way. I had this interesting interaction with someone in the comment section of a couple of YouTube videos, and it was about systems thinking, right?
Mhm.
And I don't want to say that they don't understand systems thinking, but their interpretations and explanations of what systems thinking was different to mine, and I was trying to understand where they were getting from, well, like where they were coming from, where they were getting at. And what I realized is they were mapping systems thinking, like some of the principles of system thinking, and they were mapping it to information processing, i.e., input, process, output, which isn't, it's not wrong. It just, there's just a lot of things that don't make sense. And there's no answers to yet. And I think this is where knowing, I was listening to a podcast conversation yesterday, which I think relates back to this. Knowing why you're answering the questions the way you are is more important than actually like the tactical information of the answer. I can give an answer. 1 + 1 is 2. Great. Okay, I know the answer is 2. Why is it 2? Show your workings. Like the old adage in your maths exam. Like, why is it that number? How did you get there? And when it comes to a philosophy of practice or the way you answer questions, your route in doing something, the behaviors you have, like knowing the why and the reasons behind it is just as important. And I was talking to this person about systems thinking, and they were saying, oh, yeah, you have the parts and they build up the whole. Yes, I agree. And because of, I don't want to bring in tons and tons of science here, so I'm just going to use one model that I think is popular enough, Fitz and Posner. Do you know the Fitz and Posner model?
You'll have
Of
to
like
say it. Don't remember
associative,
names.
autonomous, like cognitive, like 3 stages of learning.
Enough,
Associative
yeah.
stage, yeah. So long story short, you go from the cognitive stage of learning. So this model suggests where you have to think a lot about the
I
learning.
just love how much I just saw you squirm as you said that. I'm loving this. Carry on.
So you got the cognitive stage of learning where you have to think about the stuff you're learning, and then the associative where you don't have to think as much because it's becoming more intuitive, and then you're at the autonomous stage of learning where you can just do it. It's autonomous to you, and the idea. Yeah, I know. I'm like, I want to punch the person in the face, but
Not the person who made the comment.
no. Just like this, like the image. I have an image of like Posner, and it's just like, oh. Anyway, this will relate to my editing. So this model maps towards information, process, output, and the parts that you use. When you put these parts together to build the whole, to build the system, you then get the system. But Fitz and Posner's long way around suggests that if you break skills apart, you then become competent, i.e., good at those individual parts of the skill. You can put it back together and then be really good at the skill. So, yes, exactly. I can see your face. So the idea is in football, I'm going to use football because it's one of the most popular sports in the world. If you pass a ball from your foot against a wall and back again, you get good at passing the ball.
No, you get good at kicking a ball against a wall. Sorry.
Exactly. This is where IP and ED like argue. There was a massive thing on Twitter as well recently.
I know. I was reading it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Like, yes, this is fun. And then I found more stuff, and now I'm crying because I now have an even longer list.
Oh yeah, the list will get bigger. But there was, I mean, there's pros and cons to doing the task and the drill. Won't get into that. That's like a whole other conversation. But the idea is that you can break skills down into small parts and then put them back together. But just because you can pass again like a ball against a wall doesn't mean you can put it into a game and say, right now I can pass. So those parts broken down, yes, can build a system, a whole. But it doesn't mean it's the same system and the same whole because the parts were reliant, i.e. connected to other parts in that context, in that environment. So it's not the same. And that is where system thinkers break down all these things into parts, and then they put the parts back together into a system, into a whole. But it's a different system most of the time if you have dynamic things. Like if you have a dynamic system.
We just that is one of the fundamental facts of life. It is not linear.
And that is where I get frustrated when I was getting frustrated because this person was using systems thinking, but they were trying to relate linear systems thinking to a non-linear context. They were trying to use constrained systems that have literally no dynamics involved, i.e. there is a number. a number has no dynamics. It is a number. It represents one thing. It's a priori knowledge, right? And and I don't know if it was he or she. It was a YouTube thingy with a P, pink P. But they were using systems thinking and applying it to dynamic systems without thinking about the complex and dynamic systems involved there and how parts added together don't equal a system if it's dynamic, because there are metrics in there, variables in there, factors in there that can't be linear. It's just not possible. When you look at the anatomy of a dynamical systems, it's not possible to know 3 or 4 of the variables depending on the context you're in. And obviously this is very complicated. This goes well deep into the weeds. But if you don't understand your why, shut up. Or ask. Like,
yeah, I think shut up might be a little bit no, but ask. Yeah, and actually,
I just rephrase it.
Yeah, I thought
when I said shut up, I meant shut up as in don't argue something unless you know what you're arguing about, especially like this, because I feel they were getting emotionally attached to their side of the argument. And that to me is where I'm in my head. I'm like, I tell myself to shut up. Like if I'm emotionally attached to my side of the argument and I'm not looking, not objectively, but I'm not looking at the other person's view as valid, then I tell myself to shut up. So internally, I'm like, shut up, let them speak, actually understand what they're talking about. And in that interaction, it felt like they were defending their point of view to me when I was trying to understand their point of view. Obviously, this was on a YouTube comment thread thingy. It's not one of my videos, so good luck finding it because I don't remember what video it was. I was responding to it on my phone. But I was literally like, seriously, just in my head, I'm telling this person to shut up and just read the actual words for what they are, rather than the emotionally triggering, I need to be defensive of my point. So yeah, anyway, carry on.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I've been learning quite a lot recently with my own stuff is like, there are so many issues in the business world, in the systems and the tech, and the way that it is portrayed is very much information process output. It is that in itself. And so due to that, it's like, oh, this is linear, which most business owners, I'm generalizing here, of course, are problem solvers. They love to solve problems. But what they think a system is, and this is something that I realized recently, they think a system is a linear thing that they need to solve. They fix this thing to do that thing, and that's it. And there's one solution, which means they get bored.
It's because they think of it like a machine. Everyone thinks of things like a frigging machine. It's like, it's not.
Put the pieces together in a certain way, and there's only one way you can put it together. But really, it's not. Not really.
Have you read through that the long paper that I sent you about the brain? About the brain isn't a computer.
You know, I haven't finished it now. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of complicated words, lots of really cool points in there. Yeah. I think that is the sort of article, that is the sort of conversation that's far too deep for a lot of people to read and understand. But that's the sort of thing that science communicators, I would want them to push. Hint, hint, what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing.
It's like everyone intuitively knows that the machine analogy is wrong and it's missing, but they don't have something else to use.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm trying to do in the business space with the tech. It's like, okay, stop. Let's just stop. Because often it's just jumping to someone was talking about a CRM. So customer relation management thing.
Client relation, whatever.
Whatever it is. I can never remember the stupid things.
Acronym.
I'm just like, why? Because it was like, oh, I need one. And but no one explains why. And there was a lot of responses, which is very typical in the business world. It's what you're told to do. Give advice, tell people what to do, because then you're good, and then they'll go give you money, and then blah, 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 blah. Or they're excited about the tool that they've just found. It's like, oh, use this. They're great because of this. And it's like, but why? And it's like, oh, because the features are great. It's like, yeah, but why? Why are the features great? Because they're not great if they don't fit the person who needs them. And my response was an exceptionally long I gave them what they wanted, which was tool suggestions, because everyone likes the shiny, yummy, pretty stuff. And I also went, okay, here's an actual question. Here's something for you that will actually help you come to the conclusion yourself without having to hire someone else. Because I'm like, let's talk. Here's what you do. And it's very much moving from a place of like, starting from the individual, and it is very much like, what are the pieces of you that need different pieces, and they said that they wanted to be systematized and organized and productive, and I'm like, well, what do you mean by all of those words? What does that mean to you? And break the darn thing down, because
So
they're just
buzzwordy.
those you're just woody words that experts use to confuse you and make you feel like you're not good enough.
Yeah, it's pushing a boat a little bit out there, but yeah, I
Yeah,
see what you
probably.
mean. I
But
think
it's very much just it's
when
just words.
when it comes to coaching as a profession, because coaching isn't a profession, it's in process, depending on how you define profession. Yes, there's a whole conversation around that. But I think the reason this is an interesting conversation to me is because a lot of the people inside of entrepreneurship, like business stuff, like they're all individual learners, they're all lifelong learners, they're people that are interested, they want to solve problems, they find answers to problems, etc. And most of them will have gone to the self-help place at some point, the productivity space at some point, and that is well entrenched inside of the coaching literature and the education literature. But the coaching and education literature is obviously not hidden, but it's not as popularized as everything else. When you look at the news, it took a head teacher to commit suicide for anything in the education sector to actually come up inside of the news. And you're like, that's not a good thing. But there's education news going on all of the time. And most people inside of business want to know this stuff. Instead, they get told the economics and how the world is crashing and how everything's really expensive. Yeah, we know that. We can just look at a price tag to see that. Like, what do we do about it? And that's where, because people are looking at the output, they're looking at what it means rather than like taking a couple steps back and going, okay, what could we actually do in the meantime to move this thing forwards? And I think this relates to some of the content and stuff we're seeing online as well. I mean, even Mr. Beast. You look at Mr. Beast and what he's done with some of the charity work that he's done. It's amazing. It's great. But but there are things that he's missing, things that he's not doing, things that are a little bit questionable as well, especially when it comes to like Mr. Beast, like the burger thing. Like that's really questionable with ghost kitchens. Not a big fan. There's a couple of video essays on YouTube if you're interested. But it's because he's looking at the output. He's looking at like, oh look, we took all this rubbish off this beach. This looks good. Yeah, but there's far more rubbish in the water. And there's far more problems with people putting rubbish in the water than you cleaning up a beach. You cleaning up a beach does less than 1% of anything. It really doesn't help. And when you look at the experts and you speak to the experts about it, the contribution is so minimal, but it looks good. Like it looks good. And it's very similar with a lot of the other sort of philanthropy projects that happen that are popularized. Because for it to be popularized, people need to be able to see the output. They need to be able to tangibly go, oh, there's a thing. If you say, oh, yeah, I'm investing 100 million into the educational system in a third world country, but people go, oh, okay, cool. Because it's not something they can see straight away. It's something that happens over a long period of time. But we know the things that happen over a long period of time make more of an impact. They actually help. And that's, again, finding the balance between a world where people just want an output, they want a result, but they actually want it to help as well. And this is where I think the learners maybe should try and push that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with I don't know how old she is. She's a YouTuber, and she was talking about AI helping her learn. Notion AI, of course. And she's saying, oh, it's helping me learn, blah, 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 blah. So I left a comment and said, what are you actually learning with this? Because I was curious. And she said, like, maths, economics, business, coding, this, that, and she basically just listed subjects she'd do at school. And then I followed up and said, so what specifically are you using Notion AI to help you learn these things? And she said, oh, I don't really know. So I'm like, hold up a minute. So you've done a 15-minute video on explaining how you're using Notion AI to help you learn these things. But when probed, you don't actually know what skill you're learning inside of those topics.
How to use AI.
No, it's her not understanding. Apologies. It's her not understanding the I'm going to pause myself so you don't hear the dog, and then you can carry on talking. Can you hear the
Yeah,
dog? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that is AI is a big thing right now, and it is amazing. It is. I think it is pretty impressive, and there's some really cool things you can do with it once you know how to use it. And you have people who are like, "Oh no, AI can't do this and AI can't do that." Actually, you can do a lot of things, but it requires you to know how to use it. And I think when it comes to learning, I think there is a place for it, but under very tight circumstances and clearly defined constraints that allow you to realize the weaknesses of AI and the fact that it makes stuff up and it kind of can and doesn't know some of the deliciously nuanced topics that we talk about here.
Yes.
It's really
for
so funny.
Give me a sec.
Every single time. I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll give it a try. I'll give it a try. I'll give it a try and see what happens and ask it about it. And every single time it comes out without it. I think Notion AI is great when you want either a Notion is really great when you want either a real high level overview of something that has been popularized, because it still talks about learning styles. And every time I hear learning styles, I aggressively stop the generating.
I left for like 5 seconds, and you bring up learning styles.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing to our audience?
Yeah, well, learning styles are important, obviously. And every time I see learning styles, and I just like, oh,
Yeah, but I mean, going back to this person's example, this the person not knowing what skill they were learning with I think relates to the rest of the sharing of learning of entrepreneurs and stuff. It's like, look at this tool, look at this app, look at this
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And
And
I'm
I
like,
think that's the big thing. One of the things that I'm doing with what I'm producing around AI. So I've got a mini membership kind of thing around that, which is less about giving people a bunch of things to do and more about focusing in on learning how it actually works through practical examples of like, okay, so here's how we can use it for this type of thing. And you're learning that as they're going, it's more the plan and the idea is that as they're using it, they're figuring out things themselves as they go, which they have. I've had people reply to me going, "Oh yeah, look, I can do this and combine this with this, and then it can do this, and it replies like that, and then I can edit it like this." And I'm like, "Yes, all of the things, yes." Because often what I see in the kind of businessy world with tools is people either say how to use it and give the how, or most of the time I actually don't really see the why in the business world. I haven't found it. Very few people talk about the why and the when and the where and the why should the context surrounding the tools, because it's not as sexy in that's what people say. But actually, and this goes back to the conversation I was having earlier, like when people realize that it's not dull, and it's not dull meaning linear and and basic and things you should know, and it is a dynamic thing, it becomes a problem to solve. And once it becomes a problem to solve, you get entrepreneurs and business owners attention.
I think
You're more likely to get their attention because they're more interested in solving something, because there is a direction to go. And then as they're going, they're learning so darn much along the way. And it is like as they perceive the environment and then the tech and the tools and the systems that are naturally developing and you know emerging. Trying to think of an easier word to say, but emerging worked quite nicely. The tools that are emerging as they do things, it's so much like that becomes a problem solving thing of like, oh, okay, so this is a thing that I am struggling with. So, okay, cool. Why am I struggling with it? Is there something in the environment? Is there something here? Have I constrained myself? Do I need to constrain myself more? Do I need to allow myself a little bit more space? What do I need? And then it's like, oh, let me go move these dials this way. And then I open this up. Oh no, okay, that didn't work. Quick, put the dials back. And it's much more of a puzzle versus a machine that needs fixing.
I think worked examples as a concept is quite useful in here. I'm not a fan of cognitive load theory when it comes to application in practice, because it's literally impossible to measure. And if you can't measure something, then it's more of an abstract concept. However, worked examples, we know that having something in practice that people can see as a worked example helps them grasp the parts of that system and the parts of working. So while I'm learning, you know what? Let's talk about my editing a little bit. While I'm learning to edit the way I am, um, I'm learning a drastically different way of editing. Right, I'm learning motion graphics and animation inside of Fusion, inside of DaVinci Resolve. Yeah, which is fun, but very difficult. And the problems that I'm having is everyone uses Adobe Animate for animation. Like everyone, every single person. I don't have Adobe. I'm not going to pay for Adobe. I also suck at drawing, so I don't want to buy a tablet and then not actually use the thing. So I'm at a point where I have constraints that none of these people that are teaching this thing have. So I'm having to figure out my own solutions in my own way. so I don't have worked examples, but what I do have is examples of other contexts, like outside context worked examples. So what I'm having to do is figure out, okay, they've done this like that. How do I do that first thing? And how do I make it look like that? And is that even possible is the first question that I have. Like, can I even make something that looks like that? At most of the time, like I'm like, no, because I don't understand how half this stuff works. I'm slowly getting there. Like I have spent 5 hours so far, and I am not even one frame into the video. And the reason is because I'm understanding all of the intricacies first. So because I know upfront learning's, I need to do the upfront learning before I can just like slap loads of stuff in. I'm like, yeah, I did a video. Yeah, cool. I got an output, but I have no idea why or how or where or what. Like, how do I recreate it? And I think the worked examples is, what is it? I think it's a partial worked example is the other one. But it's having something to follow. Whereas if you're just thrown an app or thrown a bit of advice, you don't really have something to follow. I'm not saying steps. This is step 1. This is step 2. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is a philosophy, a practice, a task to do for you to figure stuff out in. Inside of sport, you go to training to practice a skill. And for whatever reason, when we take learning outside of sport, people don't think of practice. Like I was explaining to James the other day during the week, I have a warm-up when I work. I do a warm-up, the same as you would do in sport. Instead of warming up my body to perform in sport, I'm warming up my brain to perform in mental activity. But for whatever reason, I don't see a warm-up being spoken about much. Like in mental.
I remember, I think we had an episode a little while back about that.
It's one of those things that happens in sport.
Really fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of those things that happens in sport. I'm like, why don't we do this in like mental action? It's the same with like practice. When you're practicing rote practice, you could just replace rote practice with blocked practice inside of like sports coaching field. Blocked practice. Okay, what other types of practice are there inside of the educational field, inside of like brain science? Well, there's not really. You do blocked practice, or you do, was it free recall? Yeah, it's just like mind mapping and note taking and all this stuff. You're like, okay, well, how can we bring in some of the sports stuff in there? Well, we got constant, we got variable, we got series, we've got repetition without repetition, and these are types of practices that have been used for years, studied for years inside of high performance movements. Why can't we just apply those inside of mental? I don't get it. Same with periodization as a tool to periodize.
Can you give me some worked examples?
Worked examples of what? Blocked practice, serial practice.
Let's do repetition without repetition. That one I've been looking at. I'm like, oh, go on, tell me.
Well, you've been looking at repetition without repetition is like doing. Well, it's not like, it is doing the similar skill in a slightly different way. So if I take a really closed skill, a free throw in basketball, like you're at the line. That's the only place you can stand. You've got your feet in the same place, and you throw the ball from your hands into the hoop, and using the same hoop over and over. Blocked practice would be doing the same thing. You just stand at the line, you shoot for however long. That's blocked. You do it over and over and over. Repetition without repetition is you would do that, but then you would maybe move to the right, then move to the left, and move a little bit further to the left, and move to the right. So you're still doing the same thing, repetition, but it's not exactly the same. So it's without repetition.
So I think this is something that I did when I played guitar. One of the exercises that I had once was I was playing basically the same note over and over and over again. And one of the activities was how many different ways can you play C? And it's about just slightly moving your finger this way and slightly move. I mean, it was that a minute detail, but I assume that sounds like repetition without repetition of like just slightly moving like the position of your hand when you've got your finger down on a string, of just like moving it here, moving it here, moving it here, like repositioning your thumb, and that's just on one hand. That's just on your fretting hand, and then you've got you're using a pick, using your thumb, using your first finger, flicking it, like all of the different repetitions you could do. So yeah, that sounds basically like what I did when teaching guitar.
Yeah, and when you think about repetition without repetition, you scale it up, and you scale up those differences, the constraints and affordances in the environment. You now look closer to practice, so representative practice. Now, as degrees of freedom are increased, because typically when you're practicing in a training environment, you're going to constrain the environment to focus on something you want to develop. Because if you just say, "Here, play a game," you're not going to focus on anything. So you need to constrain the environment to some extent.
I think this is the thing. This is the thing.
What?
Someone needs to make an LMS, a learning platform, an online learning platform where you can do this. Because that'd be amazing.
Do this? What do you mean by this?
Well, or you taking some of these concepts and putting them into practice in videos, in content,
it inherently changes the system, though. It inherently changes the system because it adds the constraint inside of the platform that you're using.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a dynamic like inside of coaching. There would need to be someone that understands all of the nuances of that environment, has expertise in that environment, one in their why, understanding why they're making the decisions they are, and having the knowledge, the professional knowledge of the sport or the thing itself to make an educated decision to help that individual learn whatever it is they want to go for. And then they can respond to the thing that the student is doing and either do something or choose not to do something, which requires a person or an AI that we currently do not have access to because they're not intelligent enough. They are just not.
They don't have intelligence. It's not intelligence, not really.
Depending on how you define intelligence, that's why I used it. But yeah, and that's why coaches, in my mind, are far more valuable than a learning platform. Mentor depends on what you mean by mentor. I know what I mean by coach. And when most people say mentor, what they really mean is someone to tell them what to do or someone to tell them what they've done.
That's what coaches, that's what coaches is defined as in business.
Yeah, that's not a coach.
No.
which we both agree on.
Yeah.
But coaching isn't a profession. So there's no standards. It's not with a sports psychologist. I can't say I'm a sports psychologist because I don't have accreditation. I don't have the criteria to say I am a sports psychologist. And the same with loads of other professions like a nurse and a doctor, blah, blah, blah. But anyone can say, "Oh yeah, I coach." And that is the issue and my frustration with the profession, not just sports coaching, just coaching in general. And obviously that's an inherent problem with coaching everywhere. But using repetition without repetition, representative practice, variables in practice, and using my understanding of sports coaching and high performance sport and skill acquisition and applying that into like cognitive learning, brain learning, like traditional learning, normal learning. I just don't see why people don't do it. I mean, no, you're not.
Because they think it's because it's complicated.
But it's not.
No,
if I say
but
to you, do a
it
warm up before you do
feels
something.
complicated. It feels complicated to people. And two, because people that this is the reaction that I had when I first explored this with you. Well, I don't want to be high performance. I just want to do my stuff. That is the reaction. It's like I don't want to be a high performance person. I just want to do my stuff. And because it's been marketed as this high performance, real like only the highest end, and it's so tough
Are
and
you talking sport
do
here?
it. Have you got the
Are you talking sport here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because there is that competitive nature from anyone who is outside the field, that is the default we see as someone from outside of the sports field. Um, it's hard to come in and take those concepts, which is why I try to bring them into business, but not talk about it as a high performance thing. Because you do have high performance coaches in business, but they're like earning millions and trillions and are all about it's just annoying.
When you say high performance coaches, like you see them out there, they're not. And that's like from a coach that's in the research, that's the thing that I just like. Because
but
the people that think they're high performance, they're not.
That's it. It's like when you look at, so if you look in the world of high performance in business, you've got these people who aren't high performance, but they appear it because they have the money. It is literally they have the money, they have the ability to basically manipulate everyone into believing them. Biased opinion, but you know.
Inside of sport, obviously you've got academy sports, and again, I'm going to use football because it's the most popular sport. But academy coaches inside of football academies, just because they're an academy coach doesn't mean they're a good coach. I coached at various academies, and the coaches that were above me were beyond shit. Like beyond shit. They made a couple of players worse. They were so bad. They were so constraining, so militaristic. They were awful. But they had their UEFA A license, which was granted by the FA, which they got like 30 plus years ago, and they never renewed it because you didn't need to. So they had the accreditation, they had the years of experience. Fuck off. All you did was shout at kids. So they had all these credentials, these vanity metrics, essentially, of being this elite sports coach that knows what they're doing. But when you ask them about anything to do with any of recent research, when I say research, I'm talking like anything in the last 20 years, 20 plus years, nothing. Goes straight over the heads. And that's what was frustrating for me coming out of university. I'm sitting there like, I've just learned all this stuff. I know some of this stuff is brand new, but I also know some of this stuff is really, really old. Like really, really old. And that's what I was going to these coaches with that are supposedly high performance coaches with loads of experience, tons of credentials. I'm like, hold up. Why are you doing that? That doesn't make sense. That literally goes against everything we've known for, I mean, in some cases, 50 plus years. That's a bad thing. Don't do that thing. So why are you doing it? Oh, it's worked for me in the past. It's worked for you in the past. Great.
It's not about you, is it?
No, but it's the oh, it worked for that one person. Yeah, but what about the 99 that it didn't work for?
Yeah.
Like you've made 99 people leave sport because you've got that one person go from academy football to like League Two. Great. What about the 99 people that could have been active for their lives and are now moving, like doing stuff? we know if people leave sport at an early young age, it's typically because of a coach that's been too militaristic, and then they don't go back into sport, or they're scared to go back to the gym or do any physical activity when they're an adult because they've had a bad experience when they were younger. So the bad coaches, I mean, this is me talking about coaching here, but the bad coaches at youth are potentially crippling adult health because they make people less likely to do physical activity.
And this is the exact same in business.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
But the unfortunate fact is that they are primarily bad coaches.
Yeah.
If we use the definition that we have on coaching, most of the coaches aren't coaches. They are people who tell other people what to do. Now there are a few.
I think gurus.
Sorry?
I think gurus is a good word to come in here.
Yeah. I think a few people try, but also because this is something that I've faced before as well. Like the way that the zeitgeist as such of the business world is that a coach tells you what to do. Coach gives you all the answers. The coach like is a guru basically, and they give you a step-by-step process. So when you have some people who don't do that and are like, okay, let's figure it out on your own, but with guidance and support and constraints and all the lovely stuff, I was like, well, this is great, this is inspiring, but I don't take action.
I think even when it comes to education online, most people don't have like they're not going into it being like, I'm going to make this person feel bad. I'm going to make this person look like this.
Oh
that,
no,
and the other.
it's not a
That's not
case
their
of
intention.
yeah, it's not an intention. The intention is to actually help and support people. But unfortunately, due to the lack of education,
And
I would and in this case, I don't mean education as in like ICF certification and all of the like
pieces of paper.
all the pieces of paper that is supposedly available. I've done stuff that is I've worked with businesses that do ICF certificate, and I read it. I'm like, yeah, but no, but this is one context. This is so like this tiny slither of context, and what about the rest of it? Which is one of the big reasons why every single time I've been like, oh, maybe I should go and get a qualification in counseling or actual coaching. I look at it and I'm like, my lecturers would hate me because I would go, yes, but what about this? Yes, but what about this? Yes, but what about this?
I don't think they would. No, because the thing is, most of the people that are teaching the courses because it's their job.
Yeah.
But they're interested in the field. So they are probably just like you in their interests, their curiosities, and they get frustrated by the system, the marking system that they've been ingrained into. I mean, that basically epitomizes teachers. Teachers love to help kids learn, and most of them are interested in helping kids learn. But the way the system works is you have to test them. So the teachers have to test the kids. I would argue the teachers should be arguing and like doing something against the testing because it is so bad. I mean, they're doing a big push in the UK about changing Ofsted because teachers get tested, which is a whole other conversation. But testing is an issue because of the way it's done. And inside of business, the test is how much money you earn. But how much money you earn doesn't mean you're good. Just like getting an A star on a test doesn't mean you're actually good at the subject. Plus, just because you got an A star on the test doesn't mean you can teach how to get an A star on the test. And inside of business, just because you got loads of money doesn't mean you can teach people to get loads of money. It means you can teach people to do exactly what you've done, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a worked example. It can be helpful, but you still need people to help whoever those people are learning on their way, which is why in my course, my Obsidian course, I am active in a Discord. I am actively responding to everyone I can in a Discord because I know the course content isn't giving them the answers that they're looking for. It's giving them worked examples that they could use, but when they have questions, they've got to ask them somewhere.
Yeah.
But then again, this is just us stream of consciousness conversations. And
do you have more to say about that? Did you actually say your
yeah, I did say my piece. I think so moving on to what I'm doing with the second channel, which I'm not going to push / plug at all until I've actually got a video up. But the plan is to talk about what I'm learning through animations, through stories, through things like that, rather than it being science communication. And there are three main reasons I've decided to do it like this. One is putting my science into practice. Because I'm actually learning something that's new and something I have literally zero, if possible, negative experience with. Because I know I suck at editing. I know I suck, like seriously suck at drawing. And I have a lot of work to go to make it acceptable on YouTube.
I have my things, but
yeah. So there's that one. So I'm actually doing the practice. I'm behavioral integrity. I'm living the research to see what works and what doesn't. And because my research, this is point 2, because my research is about sports coaching, it's very academic, it's very theoretical, because I'm not coaching sport, I'm not coaching kids. I would not class myself as an expert coach or a sports coach practitioner, because I'm not. I'm a theorist and I'm an academic, and I research learning, educational science, and I think I could contribute to a lot of the coaches that do coach sport when it comes to looking at a different philosophy of practice in the way that they coach, in the way that they act. But I can't do that as well as them, because they actually do the thing. They actually have practice in the thing. They got skin in the game, as it were. And so point 2 is to try and bring the theory, bring the stories of sports coaching into a world of not necessarily theory, but into a world of like philosophy that can be applied in different contexts to help trying to use the right words here. To help share a story that isn't narrowed in by the context. So I don't want to just give a load of sporting examples and be like, hey, now you can apply this to business, because obviously that doesn't work. So I'd need various either life examples, business examples, etc. I need different stories from different contexts. And the only way I'm going to be able to share different stories with different contexts through research is by storytelling. But storytelling, me just talking at a camera or me talking to a podcast, is not as consumable as an edited video. Doing an edited video, from my experience, is boring. And what I needed to do in my environment is make it fun, make it exciting, make it something I want to do. So I need something to learn. Well, I'm learning B-roll, I'm learning all the audio stuff inside of normal video editing. So why animation? Because it's intrinsically exciting to me. It's the only way I can articulate it at the moment, because I'm still in the process. Like, why is animating more exciting than doing a B-roll and A-roll and talking head and stuff like that? I think, it's me spitballing here, it's because of the freedom I get. It's the freedom I get to do what I want. There's less of a constraint once you understand the tool. Very similar to Obsidian, I guess. Like, once you understand what you can do, it's almost endless. Whereas with B-roll, you have to find the clips, you have to find the audio that matches the clips, and all of the principles of editing, you're constrained by the materials you have. Yeah, the material you have. And I was watching a video from editing podcast, and they were talking about Pixar, and the editor, instead of it being post-production, the editor is kind of like in the middle in Pixar, because they need to be in the storyboarding for the animation so they know roughly what's going on so they can edit it together. But then they also need to be in the creation stage so that things actually match up with the story that they want to tell. And then they're obviously in the later stage as well. And when I saw that, I was like, yes, because that's what I am. I am someone that's writing a story, doing the research, writing the story, and then editing it in a way that makes sense to me. So that's like point 2, sharing the research through stories that I think are consumable. And then point 3 is I want to share my stories, not through a lens of this is the right way, or this is the research I found, or this is the tips, or this person is wrong because of that. I want to share my stories of not necessarily my life, but the stories that I have, and explain how my brain has worked throughout that. Like, why those decisions happened the way they did, and how I think about it. Because the more I've spoken to you about how I think about things and the translation I have in my head, like the words I choose not to use and the phrases it just doesn't make sense for me to use, those sorts of things, the only way I can explain that is through a story, which...
They are fascinating. They're genuinely fascinating. So I'm looking forward to them. Very much so.
And obviously they're fun. So
yeah,
that is the big thing. Like, it is fun to make them. But obviously animation takes time.
Yeah, and that it does. Yeah, something that was coming up for me while you were talking about that, like, I'm also going through a similar experience of, like, something that I've always struggled with is just trying things for the sake of like knowing that I will be awful at it. That has been one of the awful.
Question for you. Serious
Yes.
question. Very, very serious
Yeah.
question.
Here we go.
Obviously, in animation, you need an avatar.
Mm.
Everyone on YouTube has essentially the same design, which is a white background, black lines, and then some sort of character, right? Unless they've got a team behind them, in which case they have loads of colors and loads of other fancy stuff, which, yeah, no thanks. I thought about doing stick figures, but they're no. Like, Alan Becker, I'm never even going to try and compete against him. Just not happening. So stick figures, I don't think they give me enough room to play with because I want facial expressions because I'm actually talking, whereas
Are you aware of
Hmm?
theorists? The theorist series of channels like game theory, film theory.
Oh yeah.
That might be a cool kind of clip art style.
Because what I'm thinking, obviously, I need to be in some way unique from all these other people. I was thinking of an eye patch, sensationalistic. Just throw an eye patch because obviously I can't see out my right eye. I was like, there you go. No. I mean, I've had to wear an eye patch quite a few times, and when I go out, I have to wear sunglasses. And if I could, I'd take like the one glass off my. I would wear an eye patch if I didn't get some stupid tan line, because the sun's too bright for my eye.
Yeah, I know that thing. You had was that a question?
Yeah. What do you think?
Go for it if you want to.
Yeah, no, because like I can't think of another way to be sort of unique because I suck at drawing. Like I can't
If
at the
only you knew
moment.
someone whose other half is an artist who could do it for you.
That would be nice, and they could help.
They could, yeah.
I would highly appreciate help with drawing because I suck at it. Like I'm not even joking. I play tele. I mean, this is the subject of the story that I'm like the first video is short because obviously animation takes a long time and I'm learning, and I needed to tell a story that makes sense with learning animation. So Christmas every year we play Telestrations, yeah, and basically I never win because no one ever knows what I'm trying to draw. Because it never looks like what I want it to look like. Like we play Telestrations because it's a fun family game, but really it's a let's all laugh at Danny's drawing for the next 2 hours game. So I've decided to animate, obviously, on YouTube, which requires drawing skills. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, if only you knew someone.
Yeah. I must admit, I have tried to reach out to a few graphic designers that are doing animations and stuff on YouTube. But when I look at it, I'm like, you have like they've got obviously a pad, a drawing tablet thingy, and they use Adobe or Procreate or whatever. And there's just again, I'm like a beginner learner. There is so much to learn. Like vectors. I had to learn what a vector was. I didn't know. So, but yeah, I mean, went a little bit sideways there.
Tiny bit.
Bringing it all back to I don't even know what the main point of this podcast episode was, but I think
Is it going to be a really another great titled video? Thanks for that. I was like, your title was all the things. I'm like, great. That's marketable.
Yeah, I was like, I have no idea what to call this thing.
I managed to get a better title.
What did you call it?
I think it was something. It was basically Notion AI. It was the three kind of main topics that we were talking about. Let me.
I think this one's going to be stream of consciousness.
I think that should. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah. So when it comes to these sorts of conversations, this is where I wanted to come back on. Actually, stream of consciousness loops in quite well. I think these sorts of conversations are the conversations that I enjoy having. Like,
Yeah.
I would prefer to have this sort of conversation than a podcast conversation of interviewing someone backwards and forwards sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I know that this isn't as marketable / consumable as a piece of content, which is mildly irritating.
Yeah.
But all of you guys listening, you can you can get the amazing value of Danny and John's babbles. Yeah, yep. Right. I think that's it from us.
Yep.
You got to do your bye thing.
Bye.